Tonight, has Britain lost its appetite to feed the world?
Practicality-wise, if your kid dies, you have to dig a grave.
Eddie Izzard on the famine front line and the home front, tired of giving.
If it worked, I would say give lots of money, give more money. The problem I have is it doesn't work.
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. It's 3 months to the day since the first famine in nearly a generation was declared in Somalia. 30,000 children have already died. Like many of us, actor and comedian Eddie Izzard has been struggling to make sense of the haunting images on our screens yet again. With tough times at home, some appeals are failing to reach their needs. With up to 13 million facing drought, Eddie Izzard goes to Africa with a simple question. What's gone wrong? Didn't we fix famine?
Do you remember when you were a kid at school and they said, eat your food, otherwise we're going to send it to starving kids in Africa? Well, I never ate it, but they never sent it. Then it was 1984, it was Bob Geldof, and it was Live Aid. I was street performing at the time, but I saw Phil Collins fly overhead in an aeroplane, which is always useful. But we did our bit and we moved on. It was done. London, the greatest city in the London area. Now it's October 2011. Drought, famine, crisis. What the hell happened? I thought we had this sorted. That's what Bob Geldof wished for 26 years ago.
The greatest pop concert ever, which this is, will never happen again, and hopefully will never have to happen again.
But famine is back for the first time in nearly a generation. But even Bob's Band-Aid partner Midjour fears that more than hairstyles have changed.
What happened with Band-Aid and Live Aid was a bit of a phenomenon. You know, we couldn't recreate it again today, I don't think. People are hanging on to that £5 or £10 or whatever that they'd normally give to an appeal. They're now having to think twice before they do that.
So here's my quest. Polls show that over 2/3 of Britain want the government's growing aid budget cut. Yet 30,000 children have already died. 30,000 kids. So I've hitched a ride with UNICEF to the Kenya-Somali border. What has gone wrong? Have we really lost our appetite to feed the world? And why are we still being asked? Some people have just got here and died.
And died. Some of them actually die on arrival, and that's actually created the crisis and the response.
So here's the choice. Many mums had to pick which child to keep alive as food ran out after weeks of walking.
Hussein is a 2-year-old that arrived here 5 days ago and was identified with severe malnutrition. His body is actually basically trying to cope with, just being that severely undernourished. So it's actually just shut down.
Is it definitely gets through, or is it touch and go, 50-50?
It's still touch and go. It's actually less than 10%.
Yeah, double. Hussein just is sitting there and he obviously doesn't understand a word that I'm saying, but hopefully he gets a sense that people are trying to help, and he's so thin, but he's just got very alert eyes. He just looks like he wants to get through, have a life. Good luck, mate.
We still are gapping the response that will be needed.
What does gapping the response mean?
So we still need probably about 30% more funding to get the response that will even see us through to the end of the year.
When children are starving to death, when there are huge problems of poverty and malnutrition, it is very hard to stand up and say, actually, I think the money we're giving to help some of the most vulnerable people in the world is being misspent. And that's why politicians can hit back, And the aid lobby can hit back and accuse people who stand up against this of being hard-hearted, of being selfish, and of being ungenerous.
Famine is the real obscenity.
Famine.
30,000 children
have died in 3 months.
For pop stars to stand up and say, feed the world, change the world. But life's not that easy, and it takes more than a rock concert.
in 2011. Are you kidding me?
The public realise this doesn't work. And of course now we have the background of economic crisis, spending cuts, and I think the public are getting increasingly fed up with this.
Raising money to save the children in East Africa.
So how do you get the public to dig deep, or even deeper, when over 2/3 think the government should cut aid, not increase aid?
It is difficult when you're out like today, when people are walking past you and they're not necessarily engaging or sort of donating into the bucket. But I think you can understand in some respects why people are like that, and you just smile and go on to the next person.
Now I'm just thinking, well, there'll be another one that says there's a really horrendous famine and that's awful, but then there's something else happens somewhere else, and then something else happens, and if you take it all on, then you're just a nervous wreck thinking, oh God, you know.
But Britain is pretty generous, combining individual donations and government aid. Here we go. Norway is tops, averaging 661 quid per person per year. The British people in there with 326 each, just ahead of the Americans, way above countries like Italy and Japan down there at £83 each, roughly a quarter of what we give.
We have a unique Westminster elite, a political elite which is united in saying that aid is a good thing to do.
Every 6 minutes, a child dies of starvation.
Every 6 minutes.
Every 6 minutes.
What we're trying to do at the moment with our development policy is to save the hundreds of thousands of children's lives, particularly, which are at very grave risk this autumn in Somalia, because the international community has been slow to take action and because taking action in Somalia is so very difficult.
The fear here is that we always arrive too late.
It's only, unfortunately, when there's an emergency that you really start to hear about it.
So no one seems to care if people live. Are they going to pave this over at some point? Moments later, our security truck breaks down near the Somali border, infamous for bandits and recent hostage-taking. So it's what the old pipe it just broke because of lots of usage, yeah?
I think so.
Or are we actually going to shoot off and wait for them? They'll just catch us up? Or are we going to wait for them?
We have another escort.
What is your name, sir?
My name is Julius.
Julius? So we're stuck on a road where a hostage was taken just last week. Julius stayed close. The Somali people coming across the border, that we're going to the border now, they will be walking through stuff like this. Maybe there will be roads and tracks, but it's just endless this, and the termites are the only ones that really get a good deal out of this. Over the border is in the hands of Al-Qaeda-linked militants Al-Shabaab. They have blocked most Western aid. That's why the starving have to walk to this border. Now, curiously, in the midst of famine, they also banned samosas because they are apparently too Christian. And I always thought they were Indian. But at any rate, I was worried because if the bandits came, we'd been told to surrender. We are very glad that you're here, because there were soldiers with us, and if they didn't do stuff with the guns, I was going to grab the guns, I was going to give me a gun, because I wanted to fight it out rather than just say, oh, bloody hell. Well, that showdown thankfully never happened, but every day here at Laboy, over 1,000 Somali refugees cross into Kenya. Some have walked for up to a month. Some never made it.
Unfortunately, he's lost two of his children on the way into Kenya, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, a boy and a girl.
I'm sorry that you had your loss. Did the children, they just died of exhaustion?
No, they died of hunger.
Of hunger?
Yeah, they died of hunger. In the case of Hassan and his family, they've been walking 10 days, very tired, very exhausted, very hungry. It's very painful for him to have seen his two children, youngest children, dying. You're burying your children in
on the side
of a, or and it's sandy or somewhere. Yeah. You have no mark, you have no reference, even if one day you go back.
It's very hard ground. So practicality-wise, if your kid dies, you have to dig a grave. I don't know how much energy they've got, but that's going to take an hour of digging, a couple of hours of digging per person, and you bury them. And then you put the sand back on, which is going to blow away again, and then you leave them. Even for those that make it, some hide their dying children from medics, terrified of everyone, even the doctors.
Looking for them is really a problem, but we found the father who has dug a grave and waiting for the child to die and put in the grave. It took us a lot of convincing to bring the mother back, but after 10 days the kid was sitting up and smiling. We're talking of mothers who are devastated because they have seen all their children die because they have no food to eat.
So they have cattle, 30 head of cattle, is that correct?
Exactly.
And they've just, because of the drought,
Because of the drought, they've lost everything, they're all dead.
This is 7 kids?
Yeah, there's 7 children who've lost their fathers.
Lost fathers, and they just go up and they kill for no apparent reason, they were saying. They're just
they said
random killings.
Exactly, that's what they said.
I don't know if you can see this on the camera. You can obviously see enough of it. 1, 2, 3. Cattle, you've got to understand, are a cross between a car, a house, and a fridge. This is what I've come up with. This is my analogy, which is a kind of a weird one. But it's food, and they can take food from them, and they can milk them, and their livestock, and it's also wealth. In the drought, they just die. And so your combined car, house, and fridge thing has just blown up. Which it's difficult to imagine that, because you think, well, why would I put a fridge in a car? But anyway, you've just got to imagine that. There's no welcome at this life and death finishing line, just relief. There's no big, it's not like Grand Prix and there's a big, and they're through the line. So it's just, the great image was the father and son, and they were holding each other. Just hugging, and it was very good because they just got over the border. But I assume we're safe. We made it. We made it. It's like the end of some film, the we made it bit, and it was kind of beautiful that. It's rough. I know a little bit about distances, and distances. They've gone 250 kilometers. That's about 180 miles. It's just a long way if you're walking with an entire family, and you're nothing, and you're carrying, this is what you're carrying. This is everything. What they have here, it's everything. They've had to leave everything else behind. And it's the same story in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, where thousands more arrive with nothing.
Well, hi Eddie, Mark Austin here. Well, I'm right in the middle of Mogadishu, inside Somalia, and we've got tens of thousands of people here too, looking for food and water and shelter. What of course we don't know is how many people died on the way to you, on the Kenyan border, or on the way here to Mogadishu. That is what the authorities are worried about. But I have to say, from where I am, this seems to be a crisis that's getting worse, not better.
I think there's a big problem at home because the government has given this commitment to increase aid at a time of spending cuts. Now, I personally don't have a problem. If it worked, I would say give lots of money, give more money. The problem I have is it doesn't work.
The AP reports thieving Somali gangs are stealing and selling food aid meant for the starving.
The leak claims British aid for peacekeeping was squandered on plasma TV sets, hunting rifles and other luxuries.
The solutions we're offering all too often are making matters worse.
The starving refugees say corrupt officials stole the food back when the press left.
We see again and again where this money is going into countries, and rulers who aren't committed to democracy are seeing this easy tide of money coming in ever-increasing sums, and their response is to spend money on arms because they know that their schools and hospitals are being built with foreign money.
The African president denies Lord Ashcroft's claims that UK aid helped buy his presidential jet.
At the Institute for Development Studies, researchers track the British public's attitude to aid.
The survey shows that a number of people feel that most of the aid is wasted. About half of our respondents feel that. Some feel it just doesn't work. Some feel it doesn't get to the people it needs to get to. We're spending £80 per person on international development, as opposed to £1,800 per person on the National Health Service. When it is wasted, it's highly visible. It's palaces, it's big cars, it's big entourages. But the vast majority of aid is being used well and being used to get kids into schools, to vaccinate kids. We don't hear about it because it's not newsworthy.
This was dragged out. They got bulldozers in and cleared this for rain?
With the community, yeah, because of the drought of 3 years.
Right.
The idea was to harvest water, although some have given up hope.
We want them to be self-reliant, but with no rain, it's impossible. And so they gather at Dadaab, the world's largest refugee camp.
So everyone's waiting here. These are the people we met yesterday at Liboy, and people behind the fence who they're separated at the moment, but they're looking to see if their relatives have come in. This is like the Heathrow Airport equivalent. It's just like turning up at Heathrow and seeing if your friend's going in. There's 420,000, 450,000 people, so trying to find people, everyone is being marked, but it's really difficult.
Many died trying to get here, and the survivors are left as refugees in tents. Even if the rain comes now, they no longer have farms. Now, could it have been avoided? Even the charities admit the system failed.
We did our best, but I'm not ashamed to say we tried and we failed to move people quickly enough to respond as early as we really would have wanted them to. After 84 and 85 in Ethiopia, the world did say never again, and the world acted on that. They put in place the warning systems that give us incredibly good information.
Liftoff of the Delta rocket carrying blast.
These days you can see it coming. The monitoring is in place. You get the satellite images that show that the rains aren't falling. You can see the crops aren't developing properly from the satellite images. You can get information back from the markets to say that people are selling their cattle, so the price of cattle goes through the floor, that there's not enough grain because it's withering in the fields.
So the world watched a food crisis unfold. The victims would follow.
I've been privileged to see a lot of quite ugly things happen quite close up and to meet the people they're happening to. And how do you sit down with somebody and say to them, you're going to have to suffer a few months more, one of your children will have to die, and your second child will have to look like a skeleton before I can interest anybody in this?
It was months before the emergency appeal finally went out. By then, thousands of children had already died.
I believe the alarm bells went off.
Yes.
Then what went wrong after that?
The alarm bells went off. I mean, I think you could say even from sometime into last year when we could see the drought coming and we realised things weren't good.
Tell me, how did that feel to watch all those alarms going off and see, the system works, and then nothing really happened?
Terrible, of course terrible. It's very angering because we know that children are small. It takes a child who's severely malnourished a matter of weeks to die, and to know that there are hundreds of children, ultimately thousands of children, who can lose their lives because of action that's not big enough or quick enough or good enough. Of course, that's just a terrible feeling.
The lives of over 10 million people are at risk.
3 months in, the UK appeal has raised £72 million. But even away from the chaos of Somalia, villagers in Kenya are dying. A 6-year-old told me she'd never seen rain. Children have died because cattle have to be kept alive.
The owner of this household, the mother, she has lost almost everything.
Without cattle, everyone dies.
They opt to sustain the animal than their own children.
They've even put plastic bags in the trees to give shade once given by leaves.
The weird thing is that the droughts used to happen every 6 years. Now they're happening every 2 years. In 2009, they had the worst one in 20 years, worst drought in 20 years, and this one is the worst in 40 years. And that's what's come combined.
All the loss and death in this village, yet water is just meters away, downwards.
You see pictures of a drought, you see pictures of desert, and you think, well, that's it. You've got to leave. All these people have got to die. But you can do this anyway. We can do this because water seems to be everywhere under the ground.
Yeah, well, there's water in many places. Right here in northern Kenya, there's a very huge underground reservoir, It's called the Murti Aquifer. It's a huge amount of water, approximately 200 meters under this desert.
If we see or show a picture of a kid dying, then people tend to react to that emotionally. Does this get anyone emotional? Does this work emotionally?
Maybe it's not. It doesn't tug on the heartstrings so well, but it certainly provides water in the longer term and prevents those communities getting into trouble in the first place.
This is the thing that the lifesaver. This is the anti-drought.
This ugly big machine equals life, survival, water. And if people don't want to give money again in 5 years' time, they're going to have to help us invest in these. We can't just look at the sad face and think, oh, it's a sad face, but what is the solution?
It's hard to think that underneath all those dead cattle, there's water. But there have been some amazing breakthroughs since the last famine. Saving these kids from death needs love, skill, and enriched peanut butter. These packs have revolutionized treatment, saving thousands.
It gets the energy dense in like a package. So it gives them, it's like liquid gold. It gives them everything they need in a small package. It keeps it clean, which is a big thing when there's a lack of water.
So I'm going to try some now. What did I rip? I ripped out the top?
Yeah.
And I wanted to taste it, and I tasted a bag, and then I was told, don't taste it. And I went, oh, what?
Amazing.
Don't eat it? Why not?
UNICEF rule number 1. Don't eat the food meant for the kids.
Why not? But then I bought a whole bunch of peanut paste. So seeing as I tasted it and I shouldn't have, I am going to buy, there's 20 quid. So that's 4 weeks worth of kids. I don't know who I'm giving this to. I'm giving it to Linda.
Sure.
4 kids will get 1 week each, or 1 kid will get 4 weeks.
To see those kids play and laugh versus lie in a bed on the verge of life and death is incredible. And then to see children dream, just like our kids dream.
So with the famine predicted to spread, is aid working?
It does do some good. You're not just throwing it into a hole. That's the thing I think that gets to people. They think, I pay it and does anyone know that I paid it and I just get another email that says, and could you give some more? But it is working.
Since I left, they struck water 179 meters down, enough to supply 8,000 villagers and their livestock. Little Hussein, the one with the determined eyes, is now off the critical list. And that father and son are now safe in the world's largest refugee camp. Not perfect, but they're alive.
I don't know how you say the end on this. You say less people have died than could have died. Is as good as you're going to get.
The United Nations say they're still suffering a 32% shortfall in funding. In a cruel twist, even if the drought breaks, rains risk cholera in refugee camps as farms and villages lie abandoned. Now, if you'd like more information on tonight's programme, please visit our website at itv.com/tonight. Until next week, though, good evening and thanks for watching. Coming up next week, with the Dale Farm evictions hitting the headlines, Tonight looks at other flashpoints around the country involving gypsies, travellers and local residents.
Cricket, brass bands and ginger beer, who knew? Joanna Lumley's discovering the ways the British, who ruled Corfu for 50 years, left their mark. The Greek Odyssey adventure rolls on at 9. Well, next year on ITV1, we're back to Emmerdale.